Hi, everyone. Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing here, and welcome to the author journey. Today's guest is, as I said in our teasers, a quadruple threat, multi-talented Jessica Bell, who's an award-winning author and poet. I'm going to bring this up here just for a second here. She's a writing and publishing coach, a graphic designer, a singer-songwriter who was born in Melbourne, Australia. In addition to having published a memoir, 4 novels, 3 poetry collections, and her best-selling Writing in a Nutshell series, she's been featured in a variety of publications and ABC radio national shows such as Writer's Digest, Publishers Weekly, The Guardian, Life Matters, and Poetica. She's also the publisher of Vine Leaves Press and CEO of Independent Publishing Assistance. So without further ado, I am going to bring Jessica up to join me. Hi, Jessica.
Hi, Anne. So great to be here today.
Oh, it's so wonderful to see you. And boy, it's about time.
Yeah.
It just dawned on me not long ago. We have so much common ground that I thought, oh my goodness, Jessica would be such an awesome guest for the author journey. So welcome. Welcome.
Thank you very much for having me today.
Oh, it's totally my pleasure. And, I was looking at some of my background notes, and the very first time that you sort of appeared on my radar was, oh my goodness, like back in 2013 when I was looking for reviewers. I know it's a long time ago, reviewers for Mental Pause. And thank you very much. You hosted a guest blog at that time. And so I really appreciated that. And your blog at the time, The Alliterative Alomorph. I don't know if I can even. The artist
still ask me about it today, whether it's running, but no.
Isn't that funny? Well, and I should ask you, like the guest post, am I allowed to reprint it somewhere? Because
yeah, go ahead.
Oh, thank you. I will give credit where credit is.
It's offline now, isn't it? The blog?
It is. Yes, yeah. So I was able to. There's like one paragraph, and then when it goes out, it takes you into the ether. But I appreciate that. Thank you for being one of my very, very first blog tour hosts. So, but you've come a long way since then.
Oh, it's been such a long and hard-working journey. I tell you, I cannot believe the amount I have gotten done in the last 10 years.
Incredible. Do you know what? Let's just have a quick peek at this. And you call yourself a multipreneur. And boy, oh boy, isn't that the case? So
I didn't know what else to call myself. I mean, I could call myself an entrepreneur, but I'm not running one business. So I have my fingers in so many different pies.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about all those pies as I kind of scroll down all of these personas here.
Well, I'm singer-songwriter for a couple of groups and my own solo projects as well. I'm a graphic designer, which I make the majority of my living off as a book cover designer, which I started doing in around 2000. I started designing my own covers in 2011. Mm-hmm. I've been writing since 2005. Got my first book published in 2010. The publisher liquidated. Then I went into self-publishing. Started my own press eventually.
That's been, and that's been over the years. And again, when you talk about the first books that you've published, of course, as I was exploring, asking you, begging you to host me on that blog tour, I also read a couple of your first books, Bitter Like Orange Peel in 2013, and your memoir, which when I bought it was Dear Reflection, I Never Meant to Be a Rebel. Yeah. So, I mean, and that was kind of an interesting evolution because as you, grew into like more of the graphic design and the publishing. So you are the founder and publisher at Vine Leaves Press. You also kind of redesigned those two and changed the title. So talk about that process.
Well, in the beginning, when I started designing for myself, I was really just catering to my own desires. I didn't do much target audience research and see what was trending. So I just wanted to publish my books and see where it took me. But eventually, as I started learning more about publishing and designing covers for other authors, I realized, hey, I can actually make a bestseller here by designing a really great trendy cover and end up with books with my covers in WH Smith in the airport. And like, I couldn't believe where things were taking me. And I thought, okay, if I can do this on a fluke, if I actually do the research, I can really do this properly. So I started evolving and really, really taking into consideration people's target audience, what was trending, what people were gravitating towards cover-wise. I know those really trendy covers, for example, the thriller ones with the shadowy figures walking away and the dark, ominous background.
That's what I need.
When I see them every day, I get really bored. But I know that as soon as a reader sees a new book with a cover like that, they're going to go, oh, I might like that. So it's got nothing to do with my own tastes or the author's tastes either. So you really need to just grin and bear it.
But there is a skill, though, to not just understanding what those, I guess, cover tropes are, what people are expecting to see in a particular genre that draws them in to say, oh, I love this kind of a book. But the skill and the talent, the creativity to make it pop. Like you can have all the same elements, right? So you talk about it being a fluke. But before, I want to talk about those elements, but you have sort of an innate, when you talk about a fluke, it's not a fluke. You have an innate creativity, and it comes from way back, right? Like your childhood was, you were surrounded by creative
lots
people,
of
and
so
talk about like what it was in your childhood that sort of created this.
Well, I started off writing poetry really when I was, I think that's like the very first time I fell in love with writing and reading. When I started writing poetry in primary school, and everyone loved it, and I was getting a lot of praise from everybody, and I felt really in my element when I was sitting alone writing. So that really started off my creative journey. And then I started writing music because my parents were musicians, so it was around me every day. My parents were about to sell a 12-string guitar because they needed to pay a parking fine. And I'm like, and it was sitting at the front door open, obviously for the person to come and look at it. And I just saw this really beautiful instrument in this red velvet lined case. And I'm like, I was 12, I think. I'm like, why are you selling this? And my mum said, well, if you learn to play it, I won't sell it. And so I did. I taught myself how to play guitar, and that's how my songwriting began.
So how did they pay for that parking ticket?
I have no idea.
So when you were, I also, of course, when you were Shelley in Athens.
Keep Shelley in Athens.
Yes, that was one of the things that also kept me, fascinated by what you're doing and all the things. But I mean, talk about multiple creative streams. Like, how do you keep them all going? Like, and your music is amazing. I love it.
Thank you very much. I feel like sometimes I don't have a system, but when I'm looking at it analytically, I do. I mean, I have everything for Vine Leaves Press scheduled on Monday.com. I have everything for Jessica Bell Design scheduled on Monday.com. I don't have to think about what I have to do because it's all put into a system, and I'll get an email saying, you have to start this project today. This project is due today. So there is no way I would be able to handle everything if I didn't have that. I mean, it's the best investment I have made. And once everything is done from Monday, I even have like my work tab. So it tells me what I need to get done today. rather than looking at the whole schedule and trying to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
Once I've done the tasks in my today column, I give myself time to work on my own creative projects like music and writing.
Wow.
I don't
And we
have that much time for that lately since I've got a
because you're
3-year-old boy.
That was what I was going to say.
Yeah.
You're also a mom of a toddler, very, very busy toddler.
Yeah, but he's starting to get a little bit more independent now, so I'm finding a bit more time for myself. So starting to normalize again.
That's great. Well, let's rewind a little bit because we went off on that tangent.
Went on a tangent. Sorry.
Yes. Yes, but and one of your recent books that I will keep like at my fingertips and on my bookshelf to use as reference in workshops moving forward is this, Can You Make the Title Bigger? I love that title. It says The Chemistry of Book Cover Design. So we started talking a little bit about that, because you're working on it, day to day, making sure that you're including the things that a reader of a particular genre is going to expect to see in a cover, but the nuances that make the difference between, an okay cover, a good cover, and a wow cover. Like, what are those elements?
Well, I personally think you need to have a little bit of artistic flair to begin with, because even if you do the research and you put all the elements together, sometimes it's still not going to work. I mean, an author who doesn't have any design experience or can't visualize something like that will perhaps know what they want in a cover, but when it comes to executing it, it doesn't quite work. So that's why I talk about in that book how there are certain elements like making sure there's a lot of space, being aware that you don't fill it with too many colors, not too many fonts, and fonts that work for certain genre, specific design tropes that work for certain genres. Also, color coding for non-fiction books as well. Like we have certain emotional responses to colors, which is start diving into that research and you'll be surprised. You'll start recognizing why certain shops are certain colors and certain advertisements are certain colors. They're all just subliminal messages for us that we just do not realize. So you can do that with your book covers as well.
Oh, it's quite incredible how in-depth, because, I have, certain knowledge about that. Of course, I hire designers. I am not a designer. One of my authors is a color archaeologist, and she wrote a memoir. And, when we started to brainstorm about cover design, like she sent me a 10-page, outline of the research she had done and the color choices and the fonts and the image. And I'm like, awesome. Right. So I got quite an education there. So I'm like reading, this and going, oh, yes. But let's look at one of the examples. An example, like this book is chock full of great examples. So highly recommend it. But here's a great example of a before and after, I think, that really illustrates what you were just talking about. So talk about this cover and the before and after.
Well, it pretty much uses the same elements, doesn't it? It's just the composition is different. Yeah. And the fonts are different. And there's a little bit of added artistic touch to it.
Right.
I mean, that author is Jean Gill. She's also a photographer, and she takes some really, really beautiful photography. And most of her covers, I use her own photography for.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. But look at the difference in the typeface or the font, right? I mean, that's very telling in itself. The depth of the redesigned cover, right?
Yeah.
You're smiling. Is that one of your favorites?
Yeah.
That's a very nice one. And then, do you know what? There was the one with the fairground that I wanted to pull up, and I seem to have, I thought I had bookmarked it. but it was another really, really good example of
That
this
one isn't
exact.
that one's not my cover. That one is from Rachel Lawson, who is a brilliant designer. She does a lot of
Okay.
illustration work as well.
Okay,
So,
excellent. Well, while we're chatting, I should bring up your website just in case. So what is your advice when you're working with a designer? It's really a collaboration. So what are the things that you want an author to understand, when they're starting to work with you on a cover design, and what advice do you give authors that are watching?
well, the main thing that I come across with authors who are starting out, especially, they want to try and include all of something that represents all of their story aspects on the cover. And you just can't fit a whole story on a front cover. You can't fit all the characters. You can't fit all the landscapes. You can't fit all the symbolic objects.
Right.
You need to pick one that represents a theme or a feeling, or that makes a statement, or some bold colors and bold typeface that brings across a certain tone you want to portray. Maybe there's a certain tone to your writing. You're really trying to trigger an emotional response from the reader from your book cover. You're not trying to tell the story. You can tell the story when they open the book cover. So
Right.
it's all about creating an emotional response in the reader, making them go, oh, that looks interesting. I want to read the blurb. Oh, I like that blurb. I want to read the book. So it's not about telling the story on the cover. That's one of my very main.
One of your main points.
Yeah.
And the other thing that you want to make sure that people understand is that the cover is not, and you mentioned the blurb on the back, the cover is not just the front. Like it's a wraparound experience, unless it's just an ebook, right?
Yeah, that's
So,
right.
so what are some of the questions that people should be asking a designer to decide if it's a good fit?
Well, you need first to take a look at their portfolio, I think, before you even approach one. You need to know that you like their style of work, because if you can't force a designer to be creative in a way they're not.
Right.
So first make sure you love all their work. Then I would approach
That's really good advice.
Yeah. Ask if they're available and when they're available, because a good design is pretty much booked out a couple of months in advance at least. And show them that you're flexible and also willing to learn if you're new. It doesn't put me off exactly, but it's difficult to collaborate with an author who immediately sends a brief in their first inquiry stating everything they want in their cover. Approach them, ask their availability, how they work. They'll come back to you with how they work, their costs, their project agreement, things like that. And it's you're building a relationship, so don't just blast everything at once, and they're not going to blast everything at once either with you.
Right.
And you can ask for a call too if you want to speak to them, if you want to know they're a human being.
Yeah, right. And also, the hope is to establish, a good collaborative relationship, and
it
really
is a collaboration. It's not
Yeah.
just the author telling them what to do, and it's not just the designer saying this is what you're going to get. You have a conversation and you make it something that you both end up being in love with.
And if you're an author, if you're an author that's writing more than one book, having that, similar, creative branding is really important. And of course, that goes with, however you're publishing, whereas an author, an indie author who's self-publishing, rather, if you are working with a publisher, depending on the type of publisher, the publisher will really lead that charge. I'm a hybrid publisher. I certainly let the authors, have input, and there's, a lot of back and forth, but, I'm the one that usually, interfaces with the designer. Was that the same at Vine Leaves Press? So we kind of morph into Jessica, the publisher.
It's very different doing a cover for a Vine Leaves Press author than it is for my Jessica Bell Design business, because through Jessica Bell Design, the author is approaching me and hiring me for a service. It's their responsibility in the end to brief me properly and for them to make a decision that's going to sell their book. I mean, if I do 3 sample designs for what I think is going to sell their book. If they pick one and then change it to something that's completely different and they're adamant about it, that's on them.
Right. Right.
I have to do what they want. They're paying me. Through Vine Leaves Press, I don't do samples. I have in my contract that the design aspect and book production is at our own discretion. They can have input. We obviously send them the designs, and if they have feedback, and there's something that resonates with us, we'll change it. But if not, what we design is what we design. And I don't just whip them up in 5 minutes. I do proper research because it's making money for the company as well. So, but I do try and be a little bit more artistic with Vine Leaves Press, because that's just our image.
Your brand.
We don't publish fully mainstream titles. They're all got a little bit of a literary bent and have a bit of experimental aspect. Even if they are mainstream reads, there's always something a little bit different about them than what a big 5 publisher will publish. So I try and make sure the covers represent that through Vine Leaves.
That's a really good comparison. And Vine Leaves is a traditional publisher, correct?
Yeah.
So that again would be the difference. If somebody were to hire you, Jessica Bell Designs, they're putting forth the finances to pay for that cover. So that's an independent self-published author. If it's a Vine Leaves Press author, it's a traditional publishing process, and the author does not pay for that.
No.
But if an author is doing their own, is a self-published author and is looking for their own designer, what is the sort of the range of the cost for a cover that they should expect to pay?
Well, my cheapest is 550 euros for an ebook, paperback, and a 3D mock-up. That around today's exchange rate, I think that's around 580 USD.
Okay.
So that's my cheapest. Then you can get bigger packages with hardcover files, audiobook files, marketing materials. If you want that's a cover used by that's a cover with manipulated stock imagery. Okay. If you want custom illustration, that has to be briefed, and cost is dependent on the author's needs. I mean, I've done a cover that cost 2,000 euros before because it was just fully intense illustration work. So,
well, and that's, I mean, to be expected if you're, the difference between using a stock photo and an original illustration, which is going to be more time consuming. And would you do the illustration yourself? Like, are you?
I have an assistant. Her name's Stacey Albertis. She's actually Australian Greek too, and she helps me with illustration because I'm not an illustrator. So I do the creative design process, and if I need some illustration, I'll get her to do that for me, and I'll incorporate it into.
Okay. And I forgot to mention, you are coming to us from Greece. Are you still in Athens? Are you in Athens? Yeah. Okay. Greece is one of my favorite places in the whole wide world. I've sailed the Greek islands many times. So one day I will come back. But, COVID did kind of put the kibosh to that.
You'll have to get in touch. I'll have to go for a coffee.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Maybe I'll come hear you sing too. So we're gonna shift a little bit and talk about your work as a writing coach. And the editing piece. And I'm going to bring up you have this Writing in a Nutshell series that also was one of the first books of yours that I devoured. Oh, really? Let's see. Yeah. So here's the Writing in a Nutshell series. Talk a little bit about that.
Well, when I started writing, I was really quite overwhelmed with all the rules in order to plot a book and write in an entertaining way that wasn't just telling the story, but actually showing the story and being writing in a cinematic way so that the reader can be totally immersed in the story. And then I read Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. Is it Lamott or Lamott?
Lamott, I always thought that.
That's my Australian coming out of me.
But a very well-known author for sure.
Yeah. And that section about writing in short bursts really resonated with me. And I thought, why aren't there any writing books out there that give examples of how to do that? I mean, if you start small and then you put it together, it's such a less daunting task. So I wrote this series that taught various aspects of writing with before and after examples and then prompts for the writer to do it themselves. And my books aren't about plotting. It's all about showing versus telling, using senses, getting rid of adverbs. I also have a book on self-editing, which simplifies it for you as well. I'm going to go back to that title in a sec because there's something funny I want to say about it.
The first one?
This Polish Your Fiction.
Oh, yes, please. Okay.
I remember when I was trying to pick the title, everyone thought it was Polish. I'm like, the book's not about Polish. But despite the confusion, I left it as it was because I just thought it worked.
Yeah, that's too funny. And you also have the
self-publishing one as well, which is a quick step-by-step, get your feet wet guide on how to publish your first book without it being too overwhelming. I mean, if you're planning on building a really big self-publishing business for yourself with like a series of 20 books, I wouldn't use self-publishing. Yeah, if you're like you've got one book and you just want to try it out, that would be the way to go. Just something quick and easy. If you don't know you want to continue it as a full-on author, what's it called now? Authorpreneur business.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Oh, that's there's a book called 8, Author, Publisher, Entrepreneur that you should Guy Kawasaki, I think his name is. Anyway, you also have this adverbs and cliches in a nutshell that I really liked as well. So those in a nutshell books. Yeah, in the Sixth Sense. Yeah. That one
I actually has them all in it. This purple
Pardon me?
This purple one has all of the 3 first little pocket guides. So if you want that, so this is one with the first 3 little books that I wrote. So I joined them into one, and then I did the Polish Fiction and the self-publishing. So if you get those 3, you have all of them. Or you can get the box set, which has everything in it.
Right. I think, you know what, I think I was one of your advanced reviewers when you put them all in a collection. Yeah. And yes, I use those a lot in my workshops.
I'm so glad they're relevant. I wrote them such a long time ago.
Oh no, and I mean they're evergreen, honestly. Like the advice in them doesn't ever, fade or is always relevant in my mind anyway. So I want to also, before we wrap up, I want to share your Vine Leaves Press and talk a little bit about, you did touch a bit on the, the nature of Vine Leaves Press. It's a traditional press, but talk again about the type of books you publish and how somebody can reach out and submit a request or an inquiry.
Okay. Well, This Vine Leaves Press publishes books that straddle the line between mainstream and experimental.
Mhm.
So, for example, if you've got a novel that is heavy on plot, but written in a very literary way, that would suit us. We publish a lot of memoir, creative nonfiction, essay collections, nonfiction essay collections.
You've done a historical fiction.
Historical fiction, speculative fiction, thrillers, but everything is really has a literary bent. So
Okay.
don't think so Jack. We don't do stuff like Jack Reaper. Is it that? Yeah.
Reacher.
See, I don't even know the name of it.
Become a very popular series.
Yeah, I know, I haven't watched it. Yeah,
I get totally sucked into that kind of stuff. So
yeah.
yeah. But I do also love, the other, the speculative fiction, and historical fiction is one of my favorites. And we both worked with Apple Gidley, who's a brilliant author.
She's fantastic. She's one of the Vine Leaves Press authors.
Yeah, yes. Have You Eaten Rice Today? I love that. So, and I was so excited when that cover came out, and my blurb was on the front cover. So it's so funny how
you would be thrilled about that.
Oh my gosh, I was just absolutely tickled. So yeah, so nice how those things kind of ebb and flow. She's a delight to work with. So we're actually like pretty much out of time now. I mean, if there are any kind of final thoughts that you'd like to share, or
well, if anyone would like to submit to Vine Leaves, we're open for submissions again in September.
Okay. Excellent.
We publish around 3 books per month. Our publishing schedule is full up until March 2005, so keep that in mind. If you want to contact me for cover design, it's just info@jessicabelldesign.com. And yes, I Am Jessica Bell is my portfolio website where you can see all the different me's and have access to all my different websites and projects.
Okay, and if somebody... Oh, excellent. So please follow Jessica. If somebody is looking to reach out to you, can they find your contact at iamjessicabell.com?
Yes. They can also subscribe to my newsletter. And if you subscribe to my newsletter, you get a 10% off design coupon. And my first 4 novels and my first 2 poetry collections for free.
Awesome. Well, that's wonderful. I just signed up for your newsletter, so we'll talk. Wonderful. Well, it's such a pleasure to finally have you on the author journey, Jessica.
Thank you.
And very excited to be able to share all that you're doing in all of your entrepreneurial and creative roles. And you're just a wealth of information. And I just encourage everybody to visit iamjessicabell.com and reach out to her and learn more. And this should be your first book. Can you make the title bigger? And then any of the In a Nutshell series. But that's my opinion. Explore and find out more. So thank you again, Jessica, for joining me.
Thanks so much, Anne.
It's been such a pleasure.
Goodbye.
And thank you, everyone, for joining me on the author journey this week. Join us again next week when we have another special guest to talk about the wonderful world of publishing. So for now, I'll say goodbye. It's Anne O'Connell with OC Publishing. Have a wonderful day.